Hey, I'm Charyn Harris, and welcome to my channel. I'm a musician, a professor of music industry studies, and the host of the Charyn Harris Experience on SiriusXM Studio 54 Radio. I am obsessed with the backstories of people who move the needle in music, lifestyle, and culture. Tune in, and I guarantee you're going to be obsessed too. Let's get into it. Oh, and before we do, make sure you're following me on socials and subscribing to my channel. Some time ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with Skeete, who is an esteemed drummer and the newly named Dean of the Professional Performance Division of my alma mater, Berklee College of Music. This led us to a very open and honest conversation about everything from how we prepare ourselves in the music industry to creativity, the impact of social media and perception versus reality, and so much more. Here's your opportunity to listen in on that amazing conversation. All the talent in the world. I know a lot of really talented musicians, as I'm sure you do, who suffer from low self-esteem, imposter syndrome, and just have so many barriers that, hold them back from really living their full creative lives. And it's not about, being a star. Everybody doesn't have to be a star. But I think if you have a gift, to at least be able to express it and not have any pain points. And, and I know that for me, myself, I've had some tug of wars with playing music. And I know that it came from my family. So, I did the research on that. But I'd like to just bring that to the attention to some creatives as they're going on in their career and just having realistic expectations, things like that. Like I said, everybody's not going to be a superstar. It's quite okay. But how do you define success? How do you know when you've made it? What are your reasons? So these are some of the things that I've been diving into as I'm finishing the book. I'm editing it and planning on launching it in a couple of weeks, and then building out courses also to really support musicians in this area.
I'm looking forward to reading that book.
Oh, absolutely.
The War for Creatives.
The Art of War. It's the Art of War.
The Art of War for Creatives. Yeah. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I'll send you the forward too.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Yeah.
I keyed into a couple of things that you said that caught my attention, and as you were stating it, you were also answering it too, speaking to everybody wanting to be a star, and you followed up with, well, what's that definition of success? It's different for everybody.
Right.
And that could be a tyranny in and of itself, that idea of what you think success looks like. And I was just having a conversation with a dear friend that used to teach at Berklee, that you may know, Donna McElroy. And we were talking about innovation. And of course, she's had a stellar career singing with all the greats going back to the 80s and commercials and so on and so forth. And this commitment to trying to be innovative, but everybody's imitating what somebody else's life looks like.
Yes.
And, we arrived at, the most innovative thing and the most revolutionary thing you can do is to be yourself. Because there's only one of you. Herbie Hancock has already done it. Chaka Khan has already done it. Miles Davis has done it. Prince, and the list goes on. They've already done it. And the tyranny is trying to be them and really just being, at best, a second-rate version of them. And really to center yourself around the idea of, God gave me unique talents, a unique body, unique voice, unique mind, unique experiences, and really embracing that and accepting that and living inside of that gift which we've all been given, as opposed to thinking about an alternate us.
Right.
And running after the alternate us according to somebody else. And I think that creates a lot of stress when you deal with the dichotomy between who you are, or who you perceive you are, and who you perceive you want to be. And it makes people feel stressed out. And now in this social media world where everybody is presenting images of themselves and curating this story and this narrative of their artistry, it makes people feel even more insecure because I don't have 100,000 likes, I don't have 1 million likes. And I don't know if that's the sign of success. I think being able to do your art, create your art, find your voice, tell your story, and find a community of people that find that interesting and can relate to that story, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on with that, because I always tell people, you have to find your tribe. So, there's something that I work on when I'm teaching. I have building blocks. And one of the building blocks is called defining your wow, your what, your objective, and your why. I find that, thank you. I find that in music, musicians, we're just wired differently. And we don't tend to think beyond many layers sometimes, because we're so busy like, it's about the music. I have to be on, I have to look a certain way. So digging deeper, can you talk a little bit about that, about what it is to dig deeper? Because I think you have a great sensibility about what it is, not only to be a musician, but also, just have that deeper thought process. So how is it with your students in terms of just thinking deeper about their reasons for being there?
Right. Well, there's so much to say on that, but I'll try to focus my thoughts. Many of the students come with big dreams, and I love that. And they come bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and we want that. We want to encourage that intellectual curiosity, that musical curiosity. We want to stir that and encourage that. And they have big dreams for themselves. They want to be the next XYZ. And then they show up and they encounter other students on their instrument, whether it's voice or guitar, piano, drums, whatever. And they start comparing themselves, and they start realizing they were the big fish in a small pond, but now here are these other students. Or what also happens, they show up and they actually are even the big fish, even at Berklee, the big fish there. And then they have this identity around better than, because I play better, I'm more experienced, I'm better. And they have this self-identity. And as artists and musicians, we're very sensitive, and we're so connected to our instrument and what we do that we feel it actually is us, and our identity is tied to it. So if you're a good musician and you're applauded and celebrated by your peers, you feel good about yourself, at least externally, to a point. And if you're not a great musician, you feel lower in the tier. And sometimes we even superficially build relationships around that. And I think to really break out of that, you really have to know who you are as a human and realize music, while it embodies our bodies physically, it's still only part of who we are. And our identity cannot be wrapped up in how loud or how fast we play or how tricky what we play is, because there's always somebody better. Always somebody better. Always. And one of the challenges students face, and I know it's not just at my college, but, just as they're developing, is when they feel like I'm great and the teacher's saying, well, you actually really have to work on your skills. You have to work on these fundamental things. And it's a hit against their ego because they have a self-identity that they're great. So they struggle to overcome that. So sometimes you have to bring them back to, listen, if you get these fundamental things together that you've missed, you already got this magnanimous talent. But we got to work on some of these other fundamental things to develop your skill and get you to the next level. And hopefully you can get them into understanding that, wow, if I get this, I'm a little more well-rounded. And actually accomplishing these things will help to develop your self-identity, your self-confidence, so you could be more prepared for the world that you're going into.
Right. So how do you do that? Because the ego, as you know, for an artist is very delicate, and there is a reluctance to change. There's like this rebel, there's this anarchy. And when you're older and you're more experienced, you can kind of see it coming. But a lot of these kids, they can't. And I mean, there are even some musicians who may be a little older who have not been able to recognize. So how do we reconcile that?
That's a challenging question. And I don't want to give an answer that seems like the universal answer, because it's not. Yeah, it's different. Each individual is a little bit different, because we're dealing with humans and we're dealing with the human psyche, and we're dealing with, a person's emotions and their mind and their spirit. I think this is my little offering, is trying to get someone to buy into their own success and say, look, you have great capacity, but But I think there's more. I think there's more for you. And I want you to buy into the idea that there is more. As great as you are, or in some cases, if they don't feel great, there's more. And I would usually draw from great stories of artists, not only musicians, that help to inspire the student and say, look, this person had to do this, or this person had to work on this, or this person. And to get them to connect to a story, to realize, okay, this is part of the journey, this ebb and flow and developing as a human. It's all part of the narrative. So I try to get them to buy into their own success and overcome the fear and the trepidation and say, look, let's set some goals. You've done this week, you'll do this next week, and we're just going to take these little measured steps and take some small little risks. And let's see what happens if you take those risks. What really happened? Did you fail catastrophically? Did you die? Did somebody kill you? What happened? And usually like, no. And I said, well, how did it feel? Actually, it was pretty good. I was nervous, but I did it. And then all of a sudden, the starts to build this a little bit. The confidence builds a little bit as they step into new zones. I'm like, well, imagine if you expand this exponentially, taking a little bit more risk, being a little bit more vulnerable, being a little bit more daring, how you can grow. And I think sometimes as people get older, sometimes the fear of the experiences that they've had actually gets in the way. So, you look at babies, they grow really fast, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. But then all of a sudden we start slowing down because we're not taking as many risks because we've had a lot of fear. So you have to be intentional. And I try to bring students to that and young artists to that. You have to be intentional and pushing a little bit and learning and striving. And part of it is, you don't lose, either you win or you learn. Don't worry about failure. That's how you get better. You keep trying and striving and pushing.
That's awesome. That's really beautiful. Yeah. And when you were talking about the babies, that's something that I always say is like, okay, when you were learning to walk, how many times did you fall? How many times did you get up? Because it happens so much more often. I mean, I can't use the analogy of riding a bike because a lot of people use that, but I think I fell once when I was learning how to ride a bike. So that's not a real good one.
Yeah, that's all it took. That's all it took. It hurts so bad. You're like, I'm not doing that again.
I'm not doing that again. I'm going to get on this bike and I'm going to ride it. So, but you have those two different paradigms. You can either keep falling and keep getting up. You keep falling, but then you figure out, okay, now I have to get my balance. I have to learn how to navigate. I have to learn how to watch out for things so I'm not bumping into things. Or, you're just like, all right, I fell once. I don't like the way that feels. So I want to get up and I want to keep going and keep going. So I'd like to know, was there a point in your life where you just kind of felt like, I don't know if this is the right thing? And what turned that around, if there was one?
Yeah, I have those moments all the time, and moments of self-doubt when I see others and I start comparing myself to others that seem to have effortless mastery over things that I've been working on for years. So then you start questioning like, wow, this is really difficult for me to learn this. And this person is just, it's just effortless for them. So you start questioning yourself like, maybe this is just not for me. So then you resort yourself to this little island of your comfort zone and you only do the things that you're great at and you leave these other things alone. And I think for me, what I've done is, okay, I know I have these strengths. So let me have a sense of wholeness and completeness and confidence in the fact that I do have some strengths and lean into that, but realize, okay, there's some things I have to work on. They're not as easy, for me. And let me not compare in a negative way to somebody else, but rather take inspiration and maybe even ask questions and say, how did you do that? Like, how did you arrive at that? And sometimes you'd be surprised, at what you learn in that process from that person. Like, actually, I spent 8 hours a day just working on that one thing. And you're like, oh, well, that's why I can't do it easy. They make it look easy, but that's why I can't do that. So I think really just, leaning into your strengths and also having the confidence to do the work and be diligent in doing something step by step every day. Because sometimes we want things, and the truth is we want it to come easy and we want to skip the steps. When in reality, you really do have to put the time in because it's like a muscle, or you want to lose weight. And it's like you go to the gym one time, right? And you go for a week and then we all do it. We're looking in the mirror.
That's me.
And we're like, man. And it was a tough week. You did put it in, but you're like, it's not happening. 2 weeks, you're like, 3 weeks. And then what happens is you start to fade, right? As opposed to maintaining the intensity and build it as a lifestyle, as a way of being. You're looking at that one goal of, I just got to get a little slimmer, a little tighter, a little more fit. But if you have a bigger picture of, I want to be healthy, I want to be whole, and I'm making it a lifestyle, before you know it, you're like got this mechanism going. And then over time, you start walking in it. So that's what I had to do for myself.
Yeah, and that's really important. And I think that's part of why I look at what you're doing, your objectives, and your why. So, you can have a bigger picture and bigger reason for being involved in music. Because I remember when I first started playing and asking the guitar player I worked with, why are you doing this? He's like, oh, to pick up girls. Because there was that when you're young. But then somewhere along the line, some people become really, really great. And it's like, oh, and something else is triggered and it becomes so much more and it's so much a part of them. This is something that I noticed. I don't know whether it's just me, maybe you noticed this too, but there's sometimes a correlation between how someone plays and their personality.
It's true.
Have you noticed? Okay, so I'm not the only one who has noticed that.
And to a point, because I have to admit that, yes, but it's not always apparent on the surface in terms of their personality. So meaning if you get to know them a little bit, you might realize why they play the way they play. Because I'm saying that to say, because there are persons who I have prejudged them based on their look, and they have gotten to an instrument, and if I were to judge based on the way they looked, I would say this person is stiff, they got no soul. I could already tell, and then they touch the instrument and it's heaven. And I've had the opposite experience as well when I prejudged somebody and they surprised me. Now, to your point, once I've gotten to know people and hear how their mind works and how they relate in the world, I do see a strong correlationship between who they are as a human being and who they are as an artist, as a musician, because there's oneness there. Wherever you go, there you are. That's who you are. If you have a way of thinking about the world, I have found that some of the best artists that we respect, if we're honest, they kind of a little cray-cray. They just got a little touch of craziness. I don't know if you found that, but they just a little, some are really crazy, but the others is like a little undercover craziness. Because I think they're able to live on the fringe and take risks and see the world differently. And that's why they're able to arrive at certain interesting things that we admire. And some of the best artists we know are persons who are very emotional and very passionate. And when they play, they bring that into the music. And we feel that because artists are taking emotion, feeling, experience, and transferring it and translating it and transmitting it out into the world as sound, as a lyric. We're organizing sound and organizing the lyric, and we're taking that, we're like transmitters. So yes, personality and artistry, they're definitely interrelated, interwoven.
Wow. Thank you for that. Wow. Yeah, that's something I think about a lot when I meet different musicians and I listen to their playing and I talk to them. And I just try to put it all together in my head, who they are, their experiences. And then sometimes I'll take it a bit further and just try to figure out the course of their career. Because then sometimes I could see some musicians where they're like, I'm okay, this is who I am, I'm fearless, I'll just go talk to anybody because I just don't care. What's the worst that's going to be told to me? No. And then you get some who are a lot more protective, who are really great. I know this one musician who's like fabulous. He's actually one of my favorite musicians. And I talked to him the other day and he says, yeah, I'm finally going to put my record out. And I'm like, okay, we had this conversation 15 years ago. But in addition to, he's got this really interesting personality. He's a keyboardist, pianist, fabulous. One of my favorite living musicians. And I've been waiting for his music, but it's like, there's just been this barrier. And that's when I talked to him a little bit more about imposter syndrome and what that is and how that has affected him long run. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's definitely an issue, because it's like this fear of being judged. You know, as much as you want to be a musician, it's a safer space to sometimes play behind somebody than to put yourself out front because you think you're going to flop. But you're not realizing that you have fans and you have people that you're going to touch. And, you know, and I think trying to get musicians to understand that, finding, like you were saying earlier, finding your community, finding your tribe, because you're going to help them. You're a messenger. And I would often tell my students this, you're a griot, right? And you have a message that you're bringing to people. That's your job. So how are you relaying that message so that they get it, so it permeates their soul, so it has an impact on them, you know? So, I mean, it's a very special role.
And that's a common story. You know, I do know a lot of musicians and artists that are like that who, you know, played for a lot of different people, and they have magnanimous talent and skills. And, you know, they've even written for other people, and they have a bit of a fear of putting themselves out there because, you know, they don't want to be judged, and they have a comfort zone where they feel comfortable. But everybody's like, I actually want to hear your music. And they have this fear that, well, maybe it may not measure up, you know, to what you expect. So I've seen that over and over and over again. And that has a lot to do with the idea that we're measuring ourselves up against somebody else that we
comparing,
as opposed to being revolutionary and saying, you know what, I am who I am. This is my face. Deal with it. I'm not going to get another face.
Right.
I mean, well, some people do, you know, but I mean, this is what I got. And I'm just going to humbly submit it as a gift to the world and just see what happens.
Yes. And I think that that's really an important point of view to have. Because, I mean, what else can you do? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Or is it better to say, I've got all this music that I have socked away in my vault that no one's ever going to hear? Or, wow, I released it and it just feels so good to share it. It's like, it's all about how you frame it.
Right.
And well, I think that that's really important.
Erykah Badu said in one of her early live recordings, she said, you know, I'm an artist. I'm sensitive about my stuff. That's the PG version.
I remember that.
And that stayed with me because there's truth, you know, because the truth is when you do perform, it is an intimate expression of your feelings and your emotions of who you are. And you're also measuring yourself against what else is out there, as opposed to just saying, look, this is just my little drop of water I'm adding to the bigger sea of art. And this is my offering. You know, let me just share it. It's a gift to be able to share it. And hopefully somebody listens to it and they find some inspiration. And there will be at least one person, I'm sure, a few people that say, you know what, I really like that. So focus on them. Can't we focus too much on everybody, you know? Right.
I remember playing something when I was a kid, way before I came to Berklee, and it was a church recital, and someone made a comment about, oh, she thinks she's this or that. And I thought about that because how damaging that is. But then I also really thought about when you hear that language, you can take it two ways. You can either take it and go and start second guessing yourself, or you can listen to it and you can kind of go, you know what have they done? So I tell my students all the time, you know, when it comes to critics, consider the source, because people who really have it going on, they won't criticize you. They'll see and they'll understand what you're trying to do, and they'll say, hey, let me help you. So when you get that critic, that hater, that troll, they're jealous because they haven't accomplished anything. They're not where you are. So, you know, if they were all that, the table would be turned.
Absolutely. I love what you said about considering the source, because, you know, hurt people hurt people.
Yes,
you know?
I say that all the time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's coming from a dark place. Not that we shouldn't accept critical feedback, because sometimes we do need feedback. That's what helps us grow. But when it's mean-spirited or condescending and all that, you know, we need to resist that. And here's what I would say to that we have to be mindful of, you know, that question that you got, you know, who does she think she is? That's a really important question. not for that person who said it, but actually
Or for me,
you
yeah.
receiving that. And the reason comments hurt and criticisms hurt, the reason they hurt is not because somebody said it. They hurt because there's some part inside of us that actually believes what they said is true. That's what makes it hurt. And it's like a boat. You know, a boat has water all around it. Think of the water as criticism. It's only when too much water gets inside of the boat is when the boat actually sinks. But other than that, the boat is meant to float on top of the water. But when it's too much water inside, it sinks. So we have to learn to float on top of that criticism and use that as fuel and turn it and redefine it. Who does she think she is? Good question. Who do I think I am? I think I'm this, and reaffirm God made us to be.
Exactly. I mean, I learned a lot of lessons early on, the difference between criticism and feedback. And again, where is it coming from? Because even as an educator, you know, you can give somebody feedback and they get, oh my God, they don't like me. No, that's not it. I'm giving you feedback because I know that you have the capacity. So sometimes, you know, providing that context, because you never know someone's thought process or someone's maturity around it, or sensitivities or triggers. So,
well, that's an important point, even if I could just relate it to teaching, you know, giving students feedback that speaks to what they're doing and what they could do better, and making sure we're couching it in such a way that we're not attacking them personally.
Right.
You know, and usually for me, when I'm giving feedback to students, especially if I perceive they're a little sensitized to feedback, and especially because I teach ensembles, so they're taking that feedback in a group setting, and there's nothing more unnerving than taking feedback in a group setting.
Group setting around everybody.
You're young, you're, you know, late teens, early 20s in most cases. You're a little sensitized to that. We all are sensitized to feedback in a group. Right. So, you know, as a teacher, you have to set the tone. I'm going to give you all feedback, you know, to help you and encourage you. And usually I would try to couch it in what I call a sandwich, right? So I'll say, look, I see what you're doing. I see what you're going for. I think that's great. Here's what you could do. This is the meat of it. Here's what you could do to make that better. And then the other part, the other piece of bread is, I believe in you. I know you could do it. So let's just try it.
Yeah.
So you give them that feedback. You know, unfortunately, one of the challenges we have, you know, I think, and this is probably showing my age, I'm going to tread lightly here because I don't like to generation shame, but I think we've worked so hard for our kids to be better and do better, and the next generation to do better and be better, and lay the groundwork for that. Sometimes their skin is not as tough, you know, and feedback really makes them feel really bad about themselves, even with the best of intentions, because we're in a world of likes. Click, 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 click,
yeah.
click, click. And we feel our self-worth. There's a whole culture around building your self-worth around these likes, and people pay for likes, and, you know, it's kind of a dangerous thing. So we have some work to do as parents, coaches, mentors, educational leaders, artists, to really encourage and support the next generation. Say, look, you need feedback. This is what's going to help you to grow. I'm not diminishing you. I'm speaking to what could be better. That's important.
Right. And I think that that's the reason I started honing in on resilience, determination, and grit as a musician, because, as you know, my podcast originally was more of a chill out. And then I said, well, you know, chill out. I really want to talk about what's needed and how I can help musicians change their mindset, because it's really important, and it's important to do it sooner than later, so you can kind of get out of your way. Because I've been running into tons of musicians who have been aspiring singers, artists, producers who have been like, well, I've been in this game for 5-10 years. I was like, whoa. Okay, let's figure some things out. Because yes, it could take a minute, but I don't want you to get impatient. So where's this impatience coming from? And how can we deal with it? Because you don't want your attitude, your energy to get in the way. And, it's really interesting that with us being studied and degreed musicians, there's a whole world out there that they're all going to have to deal with. Your students, I had to deal with it. I'm sure you had to deal with it when you go out. And there are people who don't have your credentials, and you have to communicate with them. And they sit with being fine for who they are. Right. They're just simply in doing what they're doing. But because we come in with degrees and knowledge and the science of theory and harmony and, and acoustics and what have you, we come in with a much different skill set. And being able to code switch to speak to that population, to speak to those peers of ours in their language, so that we can have the commonality of getting the job done. How do you think musicians today are able to deal with that? Do you think it's something that they're able to maneuver?
So let me make sure I understand the question right. So you meaning the synthesis of us bringing a certain amount of expertise and experience in education and theory, and we're trying to pass that on to the next generation and really captivating their attention to buy into this stuff that we're bringing. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, no, not exactly. Okay, but that's very close. So, okay. All right, with us, bringing our expertise, right? Yes. It's very, very close. We have our expertise, but then, Tommy Green down the road has a band and needs you to play. But Tommy's not really, as credentialed as you are, but he really has a thing going on, and being able to communicate, because I find that is a really interesting dynamic. When you get out of school, there's an expectation that I'm a professional, I'm going to play with professional musicians, but then there's this band down the street that's just slamming because they've been rehearsing in their garage and they ask you to come in. But there are still some nuances to dealing with musicians who aren't as studied as you are academically, but have the experience as musicians.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I wasn't close at all. You just being kind.
I was being nice.
But that's okay. You're being diplomatic. I can handle it. I don't mind being vulnerable and being wrong. So let me get to that question. So I think there is a lot of value in theoretical knowledge. There's a lot of value in the experiences that we get going in some music institution or college or certificate program, even some private instruction. I think there's tremendous value in that. And I also think there's tremendous value in playing with people every single day, or playing and being out in the world and playing. And there's those individuals that, go to street school or quote unquote play by ear, although I think all great musicians play by ear, whether it's classical or jazz or R&B and pop. All the best musicians are playing by ear. There's tremendous value in that, and trying to fuse those worlds. I know it's something that we work on at my institution. I know it's something that I encourage, that the knowledge is power. Yes, so you have this theoretical knowledge, but there is something about playing in the band and refining that, and because there's other aspects to music that aren't theoretical. There's parts that are emotional. There are parts that are spiritual, for sure. There are intangible parts that bring the muse in the music that you don't get just explaining that this is C, dominant 7, sharp 9, the Jimi Hendrix chord. Yeah, I know it's that. But why did Jimmy play? Where did he play? How did he play? What was the attitude in which he administered it? And I think there is a difference, between those two worlds, but there are many people who have merged it. And going into that space as a college student, let's say you just graduated, had all this quote unquote formal education, you go into that space, and then all these people are like, man, what are you talking about? This is what we do it here. That's a world unto its own. And you just have to be open to that. We're trying to get to the end result. The end result is, does it move people? Because it don't mean a thing if it ain't got swing.
The swing.
And you have to stay open to that learning and communicate with people. Because sometimes you get education, you come into another environment and you have to learn how to be open and communicate and understand that people have different experiences, and you could bring some of that knowledge and that understanding, but there's also a lot you could learn from that person that doesn't know anything about theory, but they know a whole lot about life and music and emotions and spirituality and that expression, because that's what makes music what it is.
It is. Thank you for that. I mean, I feel that even coming out of Berklee, my biggest lesson was actually playing with Tommy Green. Tommy Green's a real guy, and he was a drummer, and he taught me how to play and how to communicate in the real world as a musician and how to pull out gifts I didn't know I had.
Right.
So
we've all had a Tommy Green in our life.
Yeah. And it's, just to have somebody who's just very raw, where you're kind of like, okay, I'm just not really used to this, but I'm going to sit here because there's something I need to learn. But yeah, when I think about some of the early experiences that really shaped me and helped me to see different angles of musicianship and people who just really loved music. And not only that, people who just dreamed about it and were able to manifest it. It's really, there's just so many angles. I know we've been on for a while. I know you've got some other things to do, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but this is really awesome. I'm really excited about it. We'll have to do this again. And I think there's so much content here that I'm thinking I could cut it up, because I usually do about a 20-minute podcast. And I think I could cut it up into a couple even. And I'm always happy to jump back on anytime if you ever want to talk about anything else. I did want to ask you, with the state of the music industry, how do you think that's affecting kids now who want to have a career in music? Because things have changed.
Right. Well, I would say, sorry about the background noise.
Oh, it's fine.
Everybody's zooming here and everywhere, including my dogs. They're trying to get in the Zoom game.
Well, I'm surprised my cat hasn't jumped up on me. So.
I think it's the new normal, so we've all kind of accepted.
You just go with it.
Go with it and just accept it. Okay, you're part of this now? Okay. Well, I think the beauty where we're at right now is, there are obviously independent labels and people are doing things independent of labels, because, the world of the music industry has changed because of the technology. And you could record, in your kitchen and have a world-class, recording right there in your bedroom. And we've seen examples of that. And even during this Zoom era, people who have really become online sensations doing some very modest recordings, because we have the tools now. And there's a certain grittiness and a certain immediacy when recordings and performances don't have that panache of your traditional record label setting that people like. There's a connection, there's a realness. And the technology has made allowance for that. So I think that's a great thing. And that's something that this generation has, even more so than we had, But the challenge is with that great gift of technology is now that we have that, it's opened up the playing field for more competition. So how do you rise above that? And that's where, going back to what you were talking about at the very beginning, having a story and having an audience that can identify with that story, because now you have a mechanism to go from artist to listener or consumer, or however you want to look at it, directly. And you could also interact with them. It's not even just like a one-way dialogue. It's like you could get it and they give you feedback immediately. I think that's a powerful thing. And that's part of the strength, but also the challenge of what we're dealing with in this generation.
Yeah, I have to agree. There's so much now. It was different because you could play more, for sure. We had so many more playing opportunities, when we were young, in a different era. And now it's just not as plentiful. So, and I often wonder how that's going to impact people making a choice to have a career in music. Are they looking at other areas? Because as we know that there are other areas, in terms of teaching, and it's not always traditional teaching. As far as, going into tech, there's a lot of, whether it's working for something like Logic Audio or Native Instruments, or, there's so many different avenues. And what's really interesting is even with COVID hitting, the music industry increased by $1.5 billion in revenues.
Wow. Wow. Can I get a tithe of that?
I know. It's like if I just get like 0.01%, I'd be really happy. But there still has been an increase. So there still is something going on. And I think that it's just making sure that musicians aren't looking at just traditional, oh, I want to be a musician and that's it. Because there's so much more available. And it's really being able to wrap your mindset around, yeah, I want to play music, but I still need to survive. So can we speak a little bit about that, about just the musician survival, struggling musician?
So you're talking about art versus, sort of art versus commerce, or the reality of trying to make a living and develop a career paid for your art, which, we all go through. And, interesting enough, I could draw from a number of different artists who are older, but I think their story is still relevant. I know that Al Jarreau was an MSW. He had a master's in social work. I know Harvey Mason, who is a preeminent drummer of the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, was working on a law degree before, the group Smooth Jazz Group Foreplay took off. I know Joshua Redman, the great saxophonist, went to Harvard for economics, I believe. Herbie Hancock himself had an engineering degree, electrical engineering or something like that. So that battle has always been there. Getting a real job or finding a way to fund your habit. That's a real thing. And the truth is not everybody's going to become a full-time performer. And what I found is that most people, even at the highest level, most people have multiple streams of income. They have multiple things that they're doing. They might be writing and producing and programming over here and doing children's music over here. And they're like just totally different things. And they can arrange for an orchestra over here, and then they go out and play for a funk band over here. And then they teach over here, and then they have an online school over here, and then they have artist development over there. So I think having multiple skills and streams of income is the time that we're in. The technology makes allowance for that. And we see a lot of examples of that out there. And I think teaching is kind of the thing everybody's leaning on and adding to their portfolio. So if I were to go back, 20, 30 years, or to speak to somebody 20, 30 years younger than me, I'd say, look, you're going to have your thing that's your strength, but while you're supporting that habit, you want to develop these other skills, too, professional skills that could support that. There's nothing wrong with that. And some of them might even be away from the music industry. You might be doing real estate, you get a real estate license, and that's your side hustle to help support your habit. That's okay, because you're trying to do something dignified and legal, to support, you doing the thing that you really love until you can transition maybe full time into doing just that, or everything inside the music industry. So I think just continue to build in those skills and know that it's not a step backward, or it's not a bad thing to be working on these other things to support you. Most people are doing that, even at the highest levels. I mean, Beyonce is like, she could just focus on performing, but look at all the stuff she's doing. She's doing movies, she's doing this, she's doing
a bunch of things, right?
Rihanna, I mean, you can go down the list.
I know. I mean, a make line, a lingerie line. I mean, but the multiple streams of income. And that's something that I try to stress with people quite often, because they just think, I'm just going to do music. And that's it. I know established artists who refuse to do other things consistently, where I'm like, why aren't you doing acting? If you notice, all the rappers are now actors. Because guess what? Nobody wants to see a 50-year-old rapper, talk about Rock the Bells,
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's the same with athletes. We know there's a shelf life for that. And then...
Exactly. I tell people, I go, you're going to have 15 minutes of fame.
Right.
How are you going to prepare for that?
Right.
Because that's the truth.
It's true. And how do you capitalize and use the resources from that to fuel the next thing that you're doing in your life?
Exactly. So, yeah. But okay, so we're just about wrapping up, but is there anything else that you want to add?
This was phenomenal. I mean, just coming here impromptu and just getting into it and talking about, music careers and education. And it's a phenomenal opportunity. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
I could come back again and talk more and hear more. About your forthcoming book.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to send you, I have a preview, like just an abbreviated version of it. So I'm going to make sure that I send that to you after we finish. For the course, just to kind of talk, just like we did now. And that way, because I think it's important for the people who can't get to Berklee to understand, other points of view, to really see what's happening, from just another standpoint, as I said. So, I've been thinking about that because I'm just finding that there's so many people, and it's not just here in the States. I mean, I have a client that I work with in the UK who's really talented. And a lot of these people, they didn't think about, I'm going to go to school for music. But I'm trying to get them to understand the value also of investing in themselves. Not only you could want to be a musician, but okay, do you have a teacher that you're working with on a regular basis? If you're not going to go the traditional route, you still have to be willing to make an investment, and you still have to know what's what. Do you have a mentor that you're working with who can help guide you, who you can go to and ask questions if you have them? So, all of these things are really, really valuable because, I just find that people still have so much of a love for becoming a musician or going into the music industry. And, any way that I can certainly help them through my experience, I'm more than willing to. I love doing that. So I want to make sure that I can keep this up.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for having me as a guest. I know it's been a long time coming, and it's been a pleasure.
I know. I'm excited. I'm really excited that we were able to do this. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to connecting again, and for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yes. All right, Sean.
Hey, you've been listening to Charyn Harris. I hope you like what you heard. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content like this, and follow me on socials to hear more interviews with people who move the needle in music, lifestyle, and culture. We'll see you soon.